Hello everyone, our topic this week was requested by Sam Reddig and Tiger Breedlove. We'll be going over the nation of Orlais from the Dragon Age franchise. Spoilers for all things Dragon Age. The
country of Orlais is one of the older human nations on Thedas, the continent on which the Dragon Age games take place, and is arguably one of the most powerful nations on the continent by the time of the games. Officially founded nearly 1,000 years before the first Dragon Age game, Orlais has deep ties to most of the major events in Thedas' history since its founding, and was actually founded in response to one of the greatest events of its time, the fall of the Tevinter Imperium and the death of Andraste. Humanity came to Thedas from across the sea, where specifically is unknown, but humans landed on the northern edge of the continent over 2,000 years before the games begin. Thereafter, tribes began exploring and spreading inland over the following years, some remaining relatively tribal, while others advanced quickly in technology, magic, and education. The greatest of these early nations became the Tevinter Imperium, a nation of mages that began near where humanity first landed and eventually grew to control nearly the entire continent of Thedas, the only human empire to do so to date. Check out our lore video on them here and in the description below. Tevinter fell through a combination of factors, including most of their gods growing silent, throwing the nation into panic, while their only active gods seemingly turned against them and led the first blight, which arguably nearly wiped out humanity, and through rebellions of the various conquered territories Tevinter had once controlled thanks to Tevinter's weakened state during the final years of the first blight. A blight being the term for when an endless army of monsters called Darkspawn raise everything in their path and are led by an archdemon, which is very, very hard to kill. See our videos on the Darkspawn and the Wardens for more details on those subjects.
The most historically important of these rebellions was led by Andraste and her husband Maphareth. Andraste was the original and is the central prophet figure for the chantry, the most powerful and widespread religion in modern-day Thedas. She claimed to speak with the Maker, the world-creating god figure of the chantry, and alongside her husband Maphareth, a chieftain and brilliant general, led a holy crusade to free all nations from the shackles of Tevinter rulership. As their armies pressed nearer and nearer to Tevinter's capital, Maphareth eventually betrayed his wife to Tevinter, giving her over to be executed in exchange for control of virtually all of the lands they had freed from Tevinter's grasp. Historians have since debated about the motivations of this betrayal, whether it was tactical or inspired by darker emotions, but the important note for our purpose is that Maphareth divided leadership of those lands between himself and his 3 sons, with Maphareth ruling what would become modern-day Ferelden, and his sons ruling what would eventually become modern-day Navarra, the Free Marches, and Orlais. Orlais was formed by Maphareth's eldest son, Isarath. At the time, it was a land of disparate tribes, a separate people. It was not an allied front that would be able to withstand or revitalize Tevinter if Tevinter chose to try and reclaim its former territory. To that end, Isarath enacted the so-called Grand Unification, through which he forcibly united all of the tribes in the region and officially founded the country of Orlais. He moved citizenry around, built new cities, and plowed under old ones, while generally redistributing and centralizing commerce and travel within Orlais, all with the intent of creating a centralized, unified nation that could withstand assaults from outside forces. This was the first of the 3 most important events in Orlais' early history.
The second came shortly thereafter. Despite Isarath's best attempts, the simple fact is that many of these tribes had lived alongside each other for generations, and tensions that had arisen from such neighbors were not so easily dispelled. The most notable of these old grudges was actually held by Isarath's wife, Jashavis, a local tribe chieftain prior to the unification. It is said that Jashavis, notably her people's first female chieftain, held a deep-seated grudge against her husband's people, seeing them as invaders just as much as Tevinter had been, and she plotted to ensure that this new nation, Orlais, would be ruled by its people and not by foreigners. To that end, a few years later, when Isarath's brother fled to Orlais when he was ousted from his own lands, she plotted with him to kill her own husband, then married Isarath's brother, who took over leadership of Orlais before having him killed, and ensuring that every one of her 2 husbands' children were slain in the process, leaving her as sole queen of Orlais, where she ruled unopposed for over 40 years. This series of events is most notable because historians cite Jashavis as being the mother of the Great Game, the particular brand of intricate intrigue and politics for which modern-day Orlais is most famous. More on that later.
About 150 years later, King Cordillus Dracan took the throne in Orlais, leading to the third of the important early Orlesian events. In the decades following Andraste's death, multiple cults of the Maker, or Andrastian cults, had spread throughout Thedas. Even in Tevinter, the country which slew her, Andrastianism had become the foremost religion. King Dracan was a devout member of the local Orlesian cult of the Maker, and he believed he had been given the holy mission to spread the word of Andraste to all corners of the land. He officially founded the Chantry, headquartered in Orlais' capital Valraillot, in the early years of his reign, unifying the disparate Maker cults in the process and making the Chantry the state religion in Orlais. He also began a series of campaigns to conquer surrounding regions in order to bring the word of the Maker to his neighbors by force. As his successes mounted, he was eventually anointed Emperor Dracan, first leader of the Orlesian Empire as it is known today. During Dracan's reign, the second blight afflicted the land, and he and Orlais led the charge among other nations to put down the Darkspawn. Amusingly, his successes and tireless wars against the Darkspawn, threats to all life that they were, did more to spread the word of the Chantry than any of his previous military campaigns combined. This despite the fact that Dracan would see the Orlesian Empire expand well into the territories of several other modern-day nations. So great was his contribution to Orlais and the Chantry that within Orlais, Emperor Dracan is revered almost as highly as Andraste herself, an honor that no other person in any other nation or Chantry sect has ever been able to claim in the centuries since its founding. Not even the various divines, the leaders of the Chantry, hold such a place of reverence in Orlesian hearts.
No other leaders of Orlais have mattered as much as these three. There have been rulers, great and terrible, brilliant and foolish, with numerous heroes and villains rising from the lowest dregs of Orlesian society, and just as many falling from Orlais' heights. In the centuries between Dracan's reign and the time of the games, Orlais has had its ups and downs. Territories were gained and lost, such that the modern Orlais, while large and powerful, is nowhere near the size it once was. Orlais played increasingly passive roles in the battles against the later blights unless their lands were directly threatened, as the blights had an unhealthy tendency to strike while there was political turmoil between Orlais and one or more of its neighbors. The Chantry has organized numerous exalted marches over the centuries, basically crusades against one enemy or another, and as the Chantry is based in Orlais, Orlesian soldiers are always prominent members of any exalted march. Unsuccessful marches were made against Tevinter several times. A march was called against the Canary people when they sought to conquer all of Thedas. Most notably, though, a march was called against the Elves of the Dales, which resulted in the Elven people being bereft of a sovereign nation to call their own. Afterward, the elves split into the Dalish, elves who wandered the wild in search of a way to restore their people to their former glory, and the City Elves, who live in slums across most nations of Thedas, and in many places live an existence akin to slavery. For more information on that, check out our Elves video.
Modern Orlais is a place of culture, art, excess, and dubious taste. In terms of architecture and fashion, the nation is very reminiscent of the European Renaissance. Artfully decorated homes, businesses, and monuments, alongside intricate and overtly ostentatious garb for the citizenry, especially the nobles as they can afford it. The lower on the social class you go, the more medievally normal the clothes become, and the higher up the ladder you go, the more fashion show runway the clothes become. But no matter where you are in the social hierarchy, one thing you'll see on nearly every Orlesian, particularly in the face of strangers and foreigners, are masks. Masks are a huge part of Orlesian culture. They are both individualized and inherited, with many subtle markings telling the knowledgeable clues about the wearer's social status, while on the more overt end, the masks act similarly to heraldry but are worn in a wider variety of circumstances. A simple example being that a noble house with an animal on their family crest, say a bear, will usually have masks that display bear motifs. Orlesian masks both conceal the wearer's expressions while loudly proclaiming their identity, all part of the nation's pastime, the Great Game.
The Great Game is simultaneously Orlais' greatest achievement and its greatest flaw. All nations in any setting, fictional or real, engage in varying degrees and types of politics. In some places, politics are played mostly in the upper levels of government or society. In a rare few, the political maneuvering is much more active in the lower levels of society. And in some nations, political savvy is required at all levels of a civilization. Orlais is one of these. It is a land of intrigue, espionage, sex, poison, scandal, slander, and assassination. Families and businesses move quietly in the shadows against one another for material or, just as valuable, social gain.
The rules of the game are basically as follows. Anything goes, so long as you don't get caught. But more complexly, if you're known for playing the game very well, and thus it is clearly known that you have numerous skeletons in your closet, that reputation comes with its own perks and dangers. In Orlais, reputation is worth as much as gold. A whisper of the provocative here can be quite beneficial, while an accusation of scandal there can be either devastating or set one up perfectly for better maneuvering later. Such is the nation's preoccupation with the game that an entire profession has sprung up around it. Orlais, like any other nation, is full of minstrels and storytellers, but interwoven amidst the simple performers are the true Orlaisian bards, master spies and manipulators trained in the arts of performance, information gathering, political intrigue, and assassination.
Bards are a well-known staple of Orlais, and are willingly invited into any party or social gathering, fully under the knowledge that a bard for hire might be working against the host or the guests. But that simply adds to the thrill, since if you win out, you get to say that you've beaten the best of the best, and maybe even found out who's targeting you in the process, if you're particularly good at the game. Even the lower classes play the game, scheming and maneuvering to raise their own social standing. Because of this, Orlaisian diplomats are sought from far and wide, as the country basically trains all of its citizenry in the art of business, intrigue, and diplomacy. And that's not even counting those who actually study the craft for a living. It should be said that not everyone enjoys the game, though. First Emperor Drakon himself tried to abolish the game, but found that doing so just made the players more insidious, and the bans were eventually repealed. In fact, the game, or aspects of it, have been outlawed multiple times throughout Orlaisian history, but the game has never stopped, and always its legality returns. For what is Orlais without the great game?
And that's basically Orlais, center of both religion and politics within the Dragon Age universe. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see in the future, do like Sam Reddick and Tiger Breedlove, and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos, hit that subscribe button, and if you'd like to see our Let's Plays, follow the link in the description and subscribe to our Let's Play channel.
In the meantime, this has been
True Masters and Morons, signing off.